Thank you, Nick, and it's good to be back in Maine. I actually used to guide in the White Mountains and in the Maine Mountains occasionally for about 15 years out of a base in southwestern Maine. So nice to be back. Today's energy debate in the media and politics often asks us, if it were a little more clearly stated, would you rather die of oil wars or climate change or nuclear holocaust or perhaps all of the above? But what if we could choose none of the above? What if we could make energy do our work without working our undoing? Could we have fuel without fear? Could we reinvent fire? Fire, you see, made us human. Fossil fuels made us modern. Now we need a new fire that makes us secure, safe, healthy, and durable. And actually, that's not just become possible, it works better and costs less than what we have been doing. So let's explore how. 4/5 of the world's energy still comes from burning every year 4 cubic miles or so of the rotted remains of primeval swamp goo. As a member of the National Petroleum Council, I should mention that those fossil fuels have built our civilization. They have created our wealth. They've enriched the lives of billions. They also have rising costs to our society, economy, health, and environment that are eroding, if not outweighing, their benefits. So we need a new fire. Switching from the old fire to the new fire means switching two big things, oil and electricity, each of which emits about 2/5 of the fossil carbon going in the air. But these two are distinct. Our electricity comes less than 1% from oil, but nearly half from coal. 3/4 of our oil fuels transportation, 3/4 of our electricity runs buildings, the rest of both runs factories. So very efficient vehicles, buildings, and factories save oil and coal, and also the natural gas that can displace both of them. But today's energy system is not just inefficient, it's also disconnected, aging, dirty, and insecure. It needs refurbishment. By 2050, though, it could become efficient, connected, and distributed with elegantly frugal autos, factories, and buildings, all relying on a secure, modern, and resilient electricity system. So we can eliminate our addiction to oil and coal by 2050 and use 1/3 less natural gas while switching over to efficient use and renewable supply. By 2050, this could actually cost $5 trillion less in net present value than business as usual, assuming that carbon emissions and all other hidden or external costs are worth zero, a conservatively low estimate. Yet this cheaper energy system could support a 158% bigger U.S. economy, all without oil or coal, or for that matter, nuclear energy. Moreover, this transition needs no new inventions and no new federal taxes, mandates, subsidies, or laws and running Washington gridlock. Let me say that again. I'm going to tell you how the United States can get completely off oil and coal, $5 trillion cheaper with no act of Congress led by business for profit. In other words, this energy solution will be designed and driven by the C-suite, not by K Street. It uses our most effective institutions, private enterprise co-evolving with civil society, sped by military innovation, to go around our least effective institutions. And whether you care most about profits and jobs and competitive advantage, or about national security, or about environmental stewardship and climate protection and public health, Whichever of those you most care about, reinventing fire makes sense and makes money. General Eisenhower reputedly said that enlarging the boundaries of a tough problem makes it soluble by encompassing the extra options and synergies and degrees of freedom that its solution requires. So reinventing fire integrates all four energy-using sectors: transportation, buildings, industry, and electricity. And it also integrates four kinds of innovation: technology, design, policy, and business strategy. Those combinations are a lot more than the sum of the parts, especially in creating deeply disruptive business opportunities. In truth, we would save far more than $5 trillion. For example, America burns oil costing $2 billion a day, but that leaves out its hidden costs paid not at the pump, but through our taxes or incomes. And we heard Governor Richardson refer to that last night. Those extra costs are at least $4 billion a day, twice the pump price, or $1.5 trillion a year. That comes in three roughly equal parts. The first $500 billion a year is sucked out of our economy mainly by OPEC's monopoly pricing that our oil dependence makes possible. And the numbers fluctuate, but you can see this is a big contributor to the balance of trade deficit to which Clyde referred earlier. The second $500 billion a year is the market value of oil's price volatility. And that whipsaws our whole economy. For 40 years, oil price spikes have preceded every recession. But just the daily yo-yo of oil prices imposes about $500 billion a year of cost and risk on every oil user. And then the third $500 billion a year we pay to keep military forces ready for Persian Gulf interventions. That's about 10 times what we pay for oil from the Persian Gulf. And it rivals our entire defense spending at the height of the Cold War. So if you think your taxes are too high, think about that. Now, oil is also finite. The Pentagon is preparing to need no oil. The rest of us should too. We should be getting off oil just to enhance national security and to save money at the fuel pump, even if it didn't also have extra hidden costs twice as big, bringing its total economic cost above a sixth of GDP. Plus, we haven't counted this yet, any damage to health, environment, global stability and development, or our nation's independence and reputation. Our mobility goes 3/5 to automobiles, so a good place to start would be making autos oil-free. Now, 2/3 of the energy needed to move a typical car is caused by its weight, and every unit of energy that we save at the wheels by reducing weight or drag saves 7 units of fuel at the tank. But over the past quarter century, epidemic obesity has made our 2-ton steel cars gain weight twice as fast as we have. Today, though, ultralight, ultra-strong materials like carbon fiber composites can make dramatic weight savings snowball and can make autos simpler and cheaper to build. Lighter and more slippery autos also need less force to move them, so their engine gets smaller. And indeed, such vehicle fitness then makes electric autos affordable because their batteries or fuel cells get smaller, lighter, and cheaper. So their sticker price will fall to about today's level with far lower driving costs. These innovations can transform automakers from wringing tiny savings out of Victorian engine and steel stamping technologies to the steeply falling costs of 3 mutually reinforcing technologies: ultralight materials, their structural manufacturing, and electric propulsion. And sales can grow and prices can drop even faster with feebates, That is, rebates for efficient new cars paid for by fees on inefficient ones. The biggest of Europe's five European, the biggest of Europe's five fee-based programs in the first 2 years tripled the speed of improving automotive efficiency. The resulting shift to electric cars is going to be as game-changing as shifting from small refinements in typewriters to the dramatic Moore's law-driven gains in computers. Of course, computers and electronics are now America's biggest industry, while typewriter makers have vanished. So vehicle fitness opens a new automotive competitive strategy to double oil savings in the next 40 years, and that makes affordable the electrification that can save the rest of the oil. Leaders are going to be laggards, just like in hybrid cars, only faster because hybrids only have one learning curve, not three. Now, America could lead this next automotive revolution. The current leader is Germany. Last year, Volkswagen announced volume production by 2013 of this 230-mile-a-gallon carbon fiber plug-in hybrid car, and excuse me, and BMW also announced 2013 production of this carbon fiber electric car. They confirmed that the carbon fiber is paid for by needing fewer batteries, and their CEO said, "We do not intend to be a typewriter maker," because he can look across Munich to where Olympia used to make excellent typewriters. Audi claimed it's going to beat them both by a year. Now, even faster and cheaper manufacturing technologies, American ones, by the way, one of our spin-offs, made this carbon cap 7 years ago in 1 minute out of carbon fiber. And you can tell from the sound it's extremely strong and stiff. I'll pass it around. Don't worry about dropping it. Tom Friedman. It's tougher than titanium. Tom Friedman whacked it as hard as he could with a sledgehammer, didn't even scuff it. So the techniques used to make parts like that can, actually it's a test piece for military helmets now shipping, can scale to automotive cost and speed with aerospace performance, and can save 4/5 of the capital needed for automaking, and can save oil equivalent to discovering 1.5 Saudi Arabias or half an OPEC by drilling in the Detroit Formation, a very prospective play. Those nega barrels under Detroit cost $18 a barrel. They are inexhaustible and all-American and carbon-free. Now, the same physics and the same business logic also apply to big vehicles. In the 5 years through 2010, Walmart saved 60% of the fuel per ton mile used by its huge fleet of heavy trucks. That was through design and logistical improvements, but just the technological improvements in heavy trucks can rise to 2/3. And when you combine them with triple to quintuple efficiency airplanes, that all adds up to about $0.9 trillion savings. And today's military revolution in energy efficiency, urged by a Defense Science Board task force on which Grog and I served, that will speed all of these civilian advances much as military R&D already created the internet, global positioning system, the jet engine and microchip industries. And that leverages faster fuel savings in the civilian sector, which uses over 50 times as much oil as the military does. I like that kind of leverage because what it can give us is neg emissions in the Persian Gulf, mission unnecessary, and the warfighters really like that idea. Now, as we design and build vehicles better, we can also use them smarter. If this graph of traffic congestion with the morning and evening rush hours were an electricity load shape, we would throw a lot of information technology and pricing and smart grid and demand response stuff at it to try to flatten it out. But by not yet doing that for road traffic, we are wasting many billions of dollars a year and rising in idle people, idle vehicles, and idle roads. Fortunately, we now have 4 powerful techniques for cutting needless driving. We can charge real-time driving cost per mile, not per gallon. We can use smart information technology to enhance car sharing and ride sharing and transit. We can allow lucrative smart growth real estate models so more people are already where they want to be and don't feel they need to go somewhere else. And we can use IT to make traffic free flowing. So together, these four proven methods can give us the same or better access with 46 to 84% less driving, saving another $0.4 trillion, plus another $0.3 trillion from using trucks more productively. Pretty soon this adds up to real money. So 40 years hence, a far more mobile U.S. economy can use no oil, saving or displacing each barrel for just $25 rather than buying it for 100 plus saves $4 trillion in present value, again counting all its hidden costs at zero. So to get mobility without oil, we can first get efficient and then switch fuels. And those 125 to 240 mile a gallon equivalent autos can use any mixture of electricity, hydrogen fuel cells, and advanced biofuels. Trucks and airplanes can realistically use advanced biofuels or hydrogen, or the trucks can even burn natural gas, but no vehicles will need oil. Any biofuels the U.S. might need, at most 3 million barrels a day, can come 2/3 from waste and can be made without displacing any cropland and without harming soil or climate. Our team speeds up these kinds of oil savings by what we call institutional acupuncture. We figure out where the business logic is congested, not flowing properly. We stick little needles in it to get it flowing with partners like Walmart and Ford and the Pentagon. And I think most of the 6 sectors that need to be transformed are already at or past their tipping point. Indeed, 3 years ago, mainstream analysts started to see peak oil not in supply so much as in demand. And Deutsche Bank even forecast that world oil use could peak around 2016. In short, oil is becoming uncompetitive even at low prices before it becomes unavailable even at high prices. Just what happened to whale oil in the 1850s. But electrified autos needn't add new burdens to the electricity system. On the contrary, when smart autos exchange electricity and information with smart grids through smart buildings, they're adding to the grid distributed storage and flexibility that help the grid to integrate variable solar and wind power. So electrified autos actually make the auto and electricity problems easier to solve together than separately, and they converge the oil story with our second big story, namely saving electricity and then making it differently. And those twin revolutions in electricity promise more numerous, diverse, and profound disruptions than in any other sector as 21st century technology and speed collide head-on with 20th and 19th century institutions, rules, and cultures. Changing how we make electricity gets easier if we need less of it. Today it's mostly wasted, and efficiency technologies keep improving faster than we install them, so the efficiency potential keeps getting bigger and cheaper. But as efficiency gains in buildings start to outpace economic growth, America's electricity use could actually start shrinking despite a little addition from the electrified autos. We can do this by reasonably accelerating existing trends. Over the next 40 years, buildings, which you remember use 3/4 of our electricity, can triple to quadruple their energy productivity, saving $1.4 trillion net present value with a 33% internal rate of return. Or to put it in English, the savings are worth 4 times their cost. Industry can also accelerate, doubling its energy productivity with a 21% internal rate of return. But there's an even more disruptive innovation we call integrative design that can boost those savings further and often make very big energy savings cost less than small or no savings, turning diminishing returns into expanding returns. That's how our 2010 retrofit is saving over 2/5 of the Empire State Building's energy, remanufacturing its 6,500 windows on site into super windows that pass light but block heat, plus better lights and office equipment, cut the maximum cooling load by a third, and then we could renovate and reduce the chillers rather than expanding and replacing them. That saved $17-odd million, which helped pay for the other improvements, and it cut the payback time to just 3 years. My own house high up in the Rocky Mountains, where it used to go to minus 47 F on occasion, and you could get 39 days of midwinter cloud, so it's 7,100 feet, is an interesting example. It inspired 32,000 European buildings that are passive. They need no heat. They have no heating system, but they cost about normal to build. And by the way, they don't have to look like this to work like this. So now let's go inside to that atrium where we're now ripening banana crops number 37 through 39 with no heating system. In 1984, this house was saving 99% of its space and water heating energy and 90% of its household electricity, all with a 10-month payback. Today's technologies, which we've just retrofitted, are even better. How much better, I'll soon be able to tell you, because we're now commissioning the software, reading out 300 data streams every 20 seconds. The main thing I've noticed so far is that the monitoring equipment seems to be using more electricity than the lights and appliances. This design approach, by the way, works in any climate, including eliminating air conditioning up to at least 115 F with lower construction cost and better comfort. The key is integrative design that gives multiple benefits from single expenditures. For example, this white arch you see wrapping around the top has 12 different functions, but only one cost. Integrative design can also boost the $500 billion of conventional energy savings in industry. For example, 3/5 of the world's electricity runs motors. Half of that runs pumps and fans. Those devices can be improved, and the motor systems that drive them can save about half their energy with a 1-year payback by integrating 35 kinds of improvements. But first, we ought to be capturing bigger and cheaper savings that are normally ignored. For example, pumps, the biggest use of motors, move liquids through pipes. A typical industrial pumping loop was redesigned to use at least 86% less pumping energy and cost less to build, not by getting better pumps, but just by replacing long, thin, crooked pipes with fat, short, straight pipes. And that also shrinks pumping equipment and its capital costs. This isn't new technology, it's just rearranging our metal furniture. So what does such savings mean for the electricity that is 3/5 used in motors? Well, from the coal or other fuel burned at the power plant to the flow out the pipe, there are so many compounding losses that only 1/10 of the fuel energy actually comes out the pipe as flow. But now turn those compounding losses around backwards into compounding savings. And every unit of flow or friction you save in the pipe saves 10 units of fuel and cost and pollution and global weirding back at the power plant. Also, as you go back upstream, the components get smaller and therefore cheaper. We have found these kinds of snowballing energy savings in more than $30 billion worth of industrial redesigns lately, everything from data centers and chip fabs to mines and refineries. And typically our retrofit savings come in around 30 to 60% with 2 or 3 year paybacks, while the savings in new facilities are typically 40 to 90% and nearly always at lower capital cost. In fact, the chip fab, the second photo up there, the sort of thing that Clyde was talking about that Intel built in China, this was built by Texas Instruments, but it was built in Richardson, Texas, not in China, because we were able to take $230 million or 30% out of the capital cost, along with good chunks of energy and water. That turned out to be more decisive than Chinese subsidies. By the way, that saved over 1,000 high-tech American jobs. And when Applied Materials, which makes the chip-making tools, wanted to send me to China to tell their big semicon conference how we did it, Texas Instruments gave their blessing. It was very brave and foresighted of them. They said, this is good for the industry, and it will promote more competition that we can bring back to Texas to do the next one even better, which they did. Now, needing less electricity would ease and speed the shift to new sources of electricity, chiefly renewables. China is leading their explosive growth and their plummeting cost. In fact, some of the latest Chinese solar power modules have just fallen off the bottom of the chart. Solar and wind power are marketplace winners today, which has a lot of other consequences. Europe has 1.1 million new renewable energy jobs, and the big winner, Germany, has more solar workers than America has steel workers. Already in about 20 states, private installers can take those Chinese, American, German, or whatever solar cells and put them on your roof with no money down and guarantee to beat your utility bill. That will be true in all the states over the next few years. So such unregulated products could ultimately add up to a virtual utility that does for you everything the utility does now, only cheaper with stable price, no emissions, more reliable, more secure, and can work with or without the grid. And that can bypass power companies just as cell phones bypassed wireline phone companies. There are a lot of ways that the incumbents could respond to this. Ostrich is not a good one. Half the world's new generating capacity since 2008 has come from renewables, and lately that's been majority in developing countries. In 2010, renewables except big hydro got $151 billion of private investment, and for the first time they came to surpass the total global installed capacity of nuclear power by adding 60 billion watts, which happens to be the same capacity that the world can now make in solar cells every year. Last year, 68% of Europe's new generating capacity was solar and wind. In fact, solar came first. It even edged out gas. In contrast, global orders for both coal and nuclear plants continue to fade because they cost too much and they have too much financial risk to attract investors. In fact, in the United States, we had 34 nuclear units proposed to be built in the new nuclear renaissance. And starting August 2005, they were offered 100+% construction subsidies. Not one of them, however, was able to raise a cent of private capital because they have no business case. I think that answers Governor Richardson's question from last night. So without them, how could we displace the coal-fired plants that make almost all our electricity? Well, efficiency in gas can displace all the coal plants at less than just their operating cost. Efficiency in gas and renewables can displace all the coal plants over 23 times at less than their replacement cost, but we only need to replace them once. We're often told, though, that only those big coal and nuclear plants can keep the lights on because they're 24/7, while wind and solar power are variable and hence supposedly unreliable. But actually, no generator is 24/7. They all break. And when they do, when a big coal or nuclear plant breaks, you just lost about 1 billion watts in milliseconds, often for weeks or months, and often without warning. Happily, grids routinely handle that kind of intermittence by replacing failed units with working units. And grids can handle solar and wind power's forecastable variations in exactly the same way. Specifically, when you have largely or wholly renewable grids that are forecasted and integrated and diversified by type and location, so the weather patterns that are bad for one source are good for another and they don't all see the same weather at the same time, then hourly simulations show that you get out highly reliable power, both for continental areas like the US or Europe and for smaller areas embedded within a larger grid. For example, the isolated Texas grid's peaky summer electric loads can get a lot smaller with efficiency and less peaky, and then we can install wind power and solar power. These are actual data. You can see how variable they are. But even when together they are producing too much power or too little, they can still match the load via ice storage air conditioning, smart charging and discharging of electrified autos, and unobtrusively flexible demand, even with, in this case, at least 86% photovoltaic and wind power, 86% variable renewables. Now, the other 14% or less can come from dispatchable renewables like geothermal, small hydro, solar thermal electric, or just feedlot biogas burned in existing gas turbines. Some utilities are already integrating these choreographed variable renewables in exactly that way. 4 German states in 2010 were 43 to 52% wind powered, and it was a bad wind year. Portugal was 45% renewable power, Denmark 36%. Now, European experience supports a transition over decades to largely or wholly renewable supply for the whole European Union. Now, America's aging and dirty and insecure electricity system has to be replaced by 2050, and whatever we replace it with is going to cost about $6 trillion net present value over the next 40 years. Whether we replace it with more of what we've got now, or with new nuclear build and so-called clean coal, or with centralized renewables, or with distributed renewables, they all cost about the same. But these 4 futures differ profoundly in their risks around national security, fuel, water, finance, climate, technology, health. For example, our over-centralized grid is vulnerable to cascading and potentially nation-shattering blackouts caused by solar storms, by other natural disasters, or by physical or cyber attack. But that risk disappears, and all the other risks are best managed with distributed renewables organized into microgrids that normally interact but can stand alone at need. And they're islandable, just like my house. We don't even know when the grid goes down because the house keeps going. This would cost about the same as business as usual, but it would maximize national security, customer choice, entrepreneurial opportunity, and innovation. Together, efficient use and diverse, dispersed renewable electric supplies are starting to flip the whole electricity sector on its head. Traditionally, utilities bought giant coal and nuclear plants, and then they built big gas plants, maybe a little efficiency and renewables. But those utilities were rewarded, as they still are in 36 of the United States, for selling you more energy. Just as stupid as it sounds. However, especially where regulators instead reward cutting your bill, the market is shifting massively towards efficiency, renewables, cogeneration, and ways to blend them together reliably with less transmission and with little or no bulk electricity storage. So our energy future is not fate but choice, and that choice is very flexible. For example, in 1976, industry and government all insisted that the energy used to make $1 of GDP could never go down. And I heretically said, well, actually, it could drop by several-fold if we make money on the deal. And that's what actually happened. It's fallen by 2-fold so far. But now we have more powerful technologies and integrative design and more mature delivery channels that can bring it down another factor 3, that is 6 altogether, faster and cheaper. So to solve the energy problem, we just needed to enlarge it. The results may at first seem incredible, but as Marshall McLuhan said, only puny secrets need protection. Big discoveries, he said, are protected by public incredulity. These big buys also happen to be the most effective solutions to climate change, to nuclear proliferation, and energy insecurity and energy poverty. Now, combine the electricity and oil revolutions and the strong efficiency that underpins them, and you have the really big story, reinventing fire, where business enabled and sped by smart policies in mindful markets can lead the United States completely off oil and coal by 2050, saving $5 trillion, growing the economy 2.6-fold, strengthening our national security, and by the way, through eliminating the oil and coal, cutting our fossil carbon emissions by 82 to 86%. Now, if you like any of those outcomes, you can support reinventing fire without needing to agree about which of them is most important. Focusing on outcomes, not motives, can turn gridlock and conflict into a unifying solution to America's energy challenge. Our team helps smart companies get unstuck and to speed up this journey. Of course, there is still a lot of old thinking out there too. As Almond Maurice Strong said, not all the fossils are in the fuel. But, you know, DuPont's former chairman, Edgar Woolard, reminded us that firms hampered by old thinking won't be a problem because they won't be around long term. What I've described here is not just a once-in-a-civilization business opportunity. It's one of the most profound transformations in the history of our species. We humans are inventing a new fire, not dug from below, but flowing from above. Not scarce, but bountiful. Not local, but everywhere. Not transient, but permanent. Not costly, but free. And but for a little biofuel grown in ways that sustain or endure, this new fire is flameless. Efficiently used, it really can make energy do our work without working our undoing. Now, each of you owns a piece of that $5 trillion prize, and our new book, Reinventing Fire, details how each of you can capture that opportunity in your own homes and businesses and communities. So with the conversation just begun at reinventingfire.com, let me invite each of you to engage with us at Rocky Mountain Institute and with each other to help make the world richer, fairer, cooler, and safer by together reinventing fire. Thank you.
Great job. Very nice. Amory, that was fascinating. And I was particularly intrigued by your, by how you finished up that our energy security is not fate but choice. We've got one dilemma. We're out of time. But people have to go to lunch. I think we need to take a space of 10, 12, 13, 14 minutes because we need to give you a chance to ask some questions. We can take more if you like, but they may throw me out. We do that. How did China and Germany lead on solar and we don't? Given all of our technology, given our climate, given the immense size of this country, is it government choice? Is it lack of government involvement or intelligence?
They have coherent policy and we don't. The same solar system installed in Germany using the same equipment, Chinese, German, or wherever it comes from, costs about 40 or 50% less than it does here because we have much more difficult approvals and much more incoherent policy. Congress has killed our wind industry at least 4 times now. They're probably about to do it again. And that's why the same Danish wind machine costs about a quarter more installed here than it does in Denmark. And, you know, Chancellor Merkel made a very simple and obvious bet. She bet it was probably going to be a better deal to pay their energy money to German engineers, manufacturers, and installers than to pay it to Gazprom, and she was right.
Okay, so you need a smarter government, but you also need a more involved government.
Or in some cases, less involved.
But she was involved, and the Chinese are involved.
Yeah, but everybody does it in different ways. I mean, the barriers to solar installations on your roof tend to be old rules rather than that the government isn't doing enough. Actually, the 30% tax credit you can do without before you could build a new power plant of any kind because the costs are coming down so fast. But actually, we've been encouraging the solar industry in league with Department of Energy to publish, as they're starting to do now, a city and state-specific guide to average and range of permitting times for solar rigs in California and get them compete over who can cut out more red tape. Some places you need 24 approvals, long forms. In Germany, it's 1 or 2 approvals of 1 page each, and then the computers parcel out the information to all the folks who need it. So it's designed for the customer, not the bureaucracy.
Thank you. We have a question up here in the balcony. Yes.
Henry Hunt, College of the Atlantic. I noticed you didn't mention anything about trains in your presentation. Do you think our rail system would be worth overhauling?
Yes, and indeed, I mentioned the $0.3 trillion saved by more productive use of trucks. That does include continuing existing trends toward road-rail integration. That's a very good thing.
Thank you. Yes. Sir.
Jim Nelson, Camden. Didn't the German government also shape the market by forcing utilities to buy solar power from providers?
Well, specifically what they did was called a feed-in tariff, which was a stunning policy success. That is, the utilities would pay you initially quite a high price for providing solar power to the grid, and then that price would gradually come down as the cost of producing it went down. And many European governments under budget stress are now phasing those out even faster or cutting them out altogether, but now the market is off and running. Feed-in tariffs work. I'm not a great fan of them, partly because, or mostly because, if you're a solar entrepreneur, they tell you to put your best talent not on taking cost out of your solar system, but on persuading the czar to pay you a higher price. So that's not quite the way I'd like to run the system. But it did work, and the world is the beneficiary of it.
Quick question, and I admire your brevity and your focus on all of these. Are we looking at smarter government, local, state, and federal? Is there a problem among the three, or who has to be smartest?
Well, they all need to be smart, and at the moment, the local and state tend to be a lot smarter than the federal at the legislative level. Now, there are policy innovations required to unlock or enable and to speed the transition I described. Rebates for cars are a great example, but they don't have to be federal. California and the 16 states that cooperate with it under the Clean Air Act are 2/5 of the market. That's enough to swing the whole thing. They have 3/4 support for it. I think they'll probably do it. The alignment of utility and customer interests, so they both are rewarded for cutting your bill, is done at a state level. That's where we regulate utilities. So we actually couldn't find any significant policy action that required congressional action. They could all be done federally or at an administrative level, or they could be done at a state level. So end running Congress seems a good way to get things done.
So we have 50 states. Who is the leader in this? Who is ahead of the curve? Who would you think we all should follow in this regard?
Well, historically,
in terms of state regulation.
Historically California, no question. But a lot of good things happening elsewhere, including, by the way, in Vermont, and I think Connecticut is the up-and-comer to watch right now. And any state can do it, and perhaps Maine has the conditions to do it faster than most.
Thank you. Yes.
Emily Lusher, Rockport. I buy your story about we should have more electric cars. And then the pragmatic question I have is, when are we going to be able to buy them? Because the companies are advertising them like crazy. But if you call any of the dealers in the brands that are supposedly selling these cars, they're not there.
That's because they haven't been able to produce them fast enough to meet demand. This is a nice problem to have. So please be patient, they're coming. And what will make them much more attractive is when the weight and drag come out of them. The German ones I mentioned from BMW, Volkswagen, and Audi are a good start at that. And with even better manufacturing processes, perhaps from our little firm in Colorado, I think we can do much better than that. The benchmark for lightweighting is the Toyota 1X, 1/X, they did 4 years ago, 5 years ago now. It's the size of a Prius inside, but it has half the fuel use and 1/3 the weight. That's a good carbon fiber design.
What's your prediction 50 years from today? What percentage of American drivers will be driving an internal combustion engine?
Approximately 0. There will be some antiquarians who will drive gasoline cars, perhaps under special permits, and they'll do special order gasoline made
Parades,
up by
that kind of
specialty
thing.
chemical companies to be brought to their meets and rallies.
Yes, up here.
Ryland Sharon Smith, I'm from Orono, University of Maine. I know that there's been a lot of research done recently in biotechnologies, especially relating to solar panels. When do you think we're actually going to see a major breakthrough that's affordable for the nation, for the world, to develop almost 100% reliable and 100% renewable solar technology that, like you find in plants?
Well, it's on the market now. Whether it is cost effective where you are depends on a lot of things like your electricity price and how sunny it is. But I mentioned it is at grid parity now against retail rates in about 20 states, as evidenced by the firms that will put it on your roof, no money down, and beat your utility bill. I would expect it to spread to all of the states, more or less, within the next 2 or 3 years. The costs are coming down so fast. It's not just the module cost, which has dropped fourfold in 3 years. It's also the other half, what's called the balance of system cost, which is the permitting, the installation, the racks, the wiring, the inverters, and so on. And we figured out a couple of years ago with industry how to cut out half those costs. That's happening faster than expected.
Great. We're going to fit in 2 more questions. We have one from one of our sister communities here in Maine. It'll come right up here, Amory. A question from Belfast, from Jeff, said back in Belfast, in 1994 I can't even read it. 1994 I bought a 512K Mac computer for $2,000, and I waited 3 months. I could have had a better computer for less money. When do I invest in solar panels so that doesn't happen to me again?
It's in the nature of these steep learning curves that it will happen to you again, over and over again. So you buy the solar panels whenever you need and want them, and you know they'll be even better and cheaper next month, next year. Don't worry about it. If you get the benefit, you can go for it. I put solar cells on my roof, 16, 18 years ago. They were like 9% efficient. Now they're around 20. The cost has come down several-fold. I'm not too worried about it. The old ones I pass along to people who need them, and we'll put them to good use. This is a story of success, not failure. Look, the clean energy market just invested its trillionth dollar since 2004. It got $260 billion of private investment last year. Now, if you read certain news channels, you might think it's failing and going away.
Which news channels, by the way? Can I guess?
I'm shocked.
I can guess.
The one that doesn't do news.
I see.
But
You mean the Fair and Balanced Network? That one?
maybe, but you see the plummeting prices put a lot of stress on companies whose business plans couldn't move that fast. But that's lower prices for installers, which is why the installers don't want to have a trade war with China over subsidies to solar panels. They like the low prices. So the solar industry as a whole does better with low prices because it sells a lot more. That's the whole point of growing the industry. This is a story of stunning success, and some folks that sell competing forms of energy don't like it, but they'd better get used to it and figure out how they can benefit from it.
Final question is back here. Yes, ma'am.
Helen Mazer of Southport, Maine. We have a lot of discussion here in Maine about wind power, but what about tidal power? What are the advantages and disadvantages of using the energy of tides?
Well, it is if by tidal you mean not the specialized Bay of Fundy kind of giant tide that requires very expensive dams, but rather what amount to underwater turbines. Those can have very high power density because water is a lot denser than air. They are in a marine environment, so stuff grows on them and they corrode and they're subject to storm damage and so on. So you need more expensive engineering, but they work very well. Like around Vancouver Island on the west coast, there's 2,000 megawatts of that tidal current power available. You can predict it 100 years ahead in the ephemeris, and actually it can reverse, and it's very neat stuff, but the engineering is tough because some of the tidal currents are so strong they tear the turbines apart. That's a nice problem to have. That just means you engineer them even better. You may use costlier, more exotic materials, but you get a lot more energy out and it's worth it. So I think this is developing fairly quickly. I didn't even count marine energy, of which that is one of several kinds, in what I described, because we have such an abundance. For example, just the cost-effective wind power from known sites at 80 meters hub height, which is a little less than modern, in available land in the lower 48 states can meet all our electricity needs 9 times over. So you only need to use a ninth of the good sites to run the country on it, and in fact there are a lot of other competitors you would mix in as well, so you need less than that. This does not sound like a very difficult siting problem.
We could have designed this entire weekend around this issue. It's so important, so fascinating. So unfortunately...
Well, I will be around all day and evening, and please make sure I get my carbon cap back.
We're going to come back at 1:30, but please thank Amory for a great presentation. That was fantastic. Really good. Really good.